Let me remind every one of ourselves to take a moment and cultivate bodhicitta motivation or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of all kind sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should participate in these Dharma discourses. Allow me to read about a page or two from this Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stages of path enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, volume number 2 in the English translation to give you the blessing of oral transmission followed by explanation.
Kaya gori le jang jambi sima nang ji jubi zumba ni kang ye jubi zumba ni ji ni kang jambi yime ba lai bu shen sima nang ji jubi zumba ni yin shi shi bu ni sim shi no shi de tam shi be de ang zong yi jia shen wo la ma la na min ji do ba to ni cha ka ye so jia shi bu ju be na jo ba la ju be de no pa du ke jo ne de de 联系生的大街呢，学校生间长忙些，西年把当老板稍微，现在下个星他也把当就将个把对没把个把通了，兄弟这把门把它动完了，你先不联系，这把咱们把这西北的工把这西北，让给的都了没得些现金。现同了没叫哎，做东西的了都做些的工人当不里边他的你先不就是什么呢？大年了没到现了，现在偏把同的你为写着错啥不现在就下个性个有人就那有人了就你头把这叫完了，如果怕怕这边到这把里送把大不带。 对了，今天节目呢，是他这些用手明白下雨前日东西叫我们那边讲没多提，这边叫我们都话讲嘛，没多些。这个现在下个完了，就那你人不是没多吧，做东没事完。他们这些恐怕他们觉得我这边的生意学到这边早年这可能那些说他们这开始我呢生意那。 这边有这样的面积些，地面先小着没动，没那小着，那小着没那把它拿给看，其实对，周围都在我们以前不推的，地面那现在当然就些的，这个人怕话嘞，你就些不用什么设备呢，上一种的那么让给他们不能说，他到你的讲生意也看不他的都给怕着都学问这都写的。 좀那么些的没那边人的呗，就你这些不啊，天气的因为些说变得没多了，这变得落多了，他们少不能跑这边去，当他们没把开销到上一落多了，他到跑上这边开销，你先不也人家也把这边能到瓦超别送，到瓦超别送的，好几天就不是。 稍微的，别了下雨了，龙井那了没办法都提起到，他们一些对吧？给写说，同样的10年学养，到对吧？来讲，兄弟的城市是被学了，怎么不了？那不是没有，兄弟的城市是被学这个，然后就重新然后到把这些呢，商业学到这提了的那些吧，老什么进步的和学就的好些了。那在你是小我兄弟的年纪前部呢，商业学到这小就什么呢？ 老弟弟写吧，老说就的别的技能考虑就不考虑不写的，空的写吧的，人帮给说到这些，就这些小学生民间先不空的写吧的，上几节学的这就的别的技能，说我们那些能不行，那么写吧就是我讲的现在经济些不行呢，小学生别学先能叫写吧就是写松说。 他底下可是群众的电影生的，那人些什么的，同步开销就可都得是吧？这个点可得的，这当然，要落这没事吧？但没道理，怎么写的不行啊？确实是吧？那人些什么的，那农民说，提前写那我们这写了，怎么写的不得？那得别那危机能的叫那说讲不。 我的这一路，的确小时什么你什么，这把什么要怎么准备我的这一路，写等个过来了讲，这不小时什么的准备，做么呢？你这把的建议，你的抗议，这边没吧？ 下一步小日们呢，绝别这么凝结些不，你呢，咱甚至写说，写说是，我第二他看见，他可是我的他有的丢我的写，有的没个丢我的写意思啦呢，他有的丢没个的呀，帮什么是阿里，你那的呀，开学的凝结，你是这样懂是吧？凝结的呀懂，那有的没个丢那，你开始他，你凝结就这个的，开始凝结就不这个的。다 인지 기도 동시에 다다다디 인지 계셔야 타마 계셔야 파디 계셔야 타마 계셔 숨기면은 다들 당보 계셔야 로사와 저지 다디 죽다데 되게 가지 이제 봐 샤주스마 가데 에데 온드라 다 라운 야 티바셔볼 온드라 가데세 닝제데시 다 디디지도 디딘 자비 쉬발레 샤주스비 쉬어몽볼 가르라고 그래서 닝제라고 그래서 닝제 네가지 닝제 네 심지 들라고 그래서 아직도 말 근데 집에 닝제 쳐보고서 네 심이 쉬어서 왔어 대다들 샤주스비 쉬어몽볼라고 말이지 추직을 내는 티바시 쉬어 광고 콜지는 배 ngāngu yungu rēsi. Wata tipa dīdi tā dīrī kia kharcha, thangbo kē shāwa dīdi, alī yugzā dīdi rē.
Gisela read from the bottom of page 28, volume number 2 in English translation, over to page 30, towards the bottom of the page. Just to recapitulate what we were discussing last time, I mentioned to you that there are two lineages or meditational techniques to cultivate bodhicitta, or the spirit of enlightenment, or mind of enlightenment. And one is called 6 causes and 1 result, lineage of the instruction, Gyunde Menga Dun in Tibetan. And the other is called equalizing and exchanging self for others, Dakshin Nyamje in Tibetan. So those are the 2 primary lineages and techniques for developing bodhicitta. And so relating to 6 causes and 1 result, lineage or the instruction for developing bodhicitta, we said that among all the causes for developing bodhicitta, perhaps the central or the most important one is great compassion, or Mahakaruna, Nyingje Chenpo, right? So it's like, we put the great compassion in the center and then look at the rest of the things. And so when we do that, as we talked about this last time, that some of the things are, they precede development of great compassion, means they are the causes for developing compassion. And many of them are the outcomes, the results of developing great compassion. So the great compassion is the center of the universe, so to speak, here, and others are kind of connected to that hub or the center, if you will. And so we also said that great compassion is very important in the beginning of our practice, in the middle of the practice, and at the end of the practice. Of course, from Mahayana Buddhism point of view, if you will, or in that Mahayana context. And so we talked a little bit about how great compassion is important in the beginning. So you see that at the bottom of page 28. And so we have a couple of passages quoted from different sources to substantiate the point. And one of them is from Akashmati Nirdesha Sutra, or the sutra requested for by somebody called Akashmati. Okay? And then the other one is from Gaya Gori Sutra, or the sutra requested for by a person called Gaya. And so the explanation given related to this is that in order to engage in Mahayana path and practice at the beginning, cultivating great compassion, or Nyingje Chenpo, is very, very important. Okay? So great compassion is cultivated in regards to what is its focus, if you will, in regards to sentient beings. So sentient beings are the focal point of developing great compassion. And so it's also stated that somewhere that if you have one kind of a spirituality or quality in your hand, in the palm of your hand, it would be equal to having many other spiritual qualities. So what is that one thing, if you ask? And that is no other than great compassion, right? So if we have great compassion, then we would also have many other spiritual qualities.
어디 다다다 디카드 셰단 고네시는 당복당님 시테네 마시고야 용으로 어디 마시지 알레 끼니 인지 수동시 인 코치 계셔버렸어. 다 코야고는 사슴 깨그랬어. 에디 코야고 가르고 와서 에네 텔야 용 샤보고 그래. 텔야 에네 친소고 그래. 텔 친신고 그래. 마시고 그래. 당유고 그래. 롱도서 니 마르고다. 디데지 도고다.
So at this point, it is as if we have kind of selected great compassion out of the 6 causes and 1 result, right? We're kind of pinpointing it. Hey, look at this. Of all these things, this is the one we should really focus on. And why is that? Because it's important in the beginning, middle, and end of our spiritual development. And of course, in terms of cultivating practice, if we go through the structured method, although it's not mentioned here, but in the beginning, we have to develop a sense of equanimity or balanced state of mind, Tibetan called tangyom, right? And then we can slowly, rationalize and think about how all sentient beings, have a mom and child kind of relationship, right? So mothers are very kind. And then we can think, okay, so if mothers are kind, then we really need to recollect the kindness of the mother sentient beings. And that's not enough. Now we should think about repaying the kindness of the mothers. And so when we try to do, how can we do that is we can see if all sentient beings as being very dear to us, right? Yong, that kind of a love, right? They're very dear to our heart. And so with that, we will be able to cultivate great compassion. And when we have great compassion, that can also triggers, if you will, the sense of personal responsibility, the willpower, right? I have to do something. I just can't be, it's not said exactly, this can't be big mouth. I just have to be action-oriented, right? That's the sense of it in the bracket. And so from great compassion comes great compassion, and the special willpower comes the bodhicitta. So that is the sequential kind of a structured practice. But out of all that structure, we have just kind of a lifted off, so to speak, the great compassion and looking at it as a very important spiritual quality to cultivate.
다 봐도 계셔. 대달 린지 심 디다부 제니 쇼게 심제 장마인 시행에 받아 라바 샤와야 신도 샤가이 타예바 더 뒤좀 받으면 그 또 가서 통하는 쇼니 택바 통하는 쇼니 택바 멤버 또 인지 심보 린지 제바서 멤버 제베도 코바 제베스 랑 대왈 메타힌 현지 통라 메조와 소태 대조바 시데스데다 파도 계셔 규제 그래서나 다 정부 선생 제시제다 돈 사이에 돈 타바샤서 담자시 제자자 이 제와 냠스를 라운데다라 이 심지어 뭔거지 이 심지어 뭔보는 영 제방에 봐시 디렉 유진직시 시행해 봐시 다 디거는 가르사다 정주스베 가제 다 심지어도 라वर 메셔 가야 말이 가제 가다 잡에 연대를 맞어라고 랍자테어 베 그래서도 랍자데 라바샤 신도 샤가 신스 샤가세 딩이다 에네 다 고도 강화라서 바 리지바 통야 되는 여러분 어 정말 또다 신도 샤가와 샤가이 타이에 바세도는 몽고 대야다 에네 제발로야 되지 다와기 로징이 에네 체징이 도 말이 게제 장면서 나거라 어찌저다 갈롭자 타오만 바시 뒤장 게제 장면서 로고 인자 에네 인제 쇼 그게 양양백에 인지체보다 야 공부 마다나 인 팀에 마사로 그러라고 간지 니체보다 공부 약보 따는 에네 파디 계셔 있고 팀에 마사하시니 카도 양조 쳐셔 버리시 인지체보 공부 마다나 에네 예랑 사도 버리시 더 디데데다
So then in the middle of page 29, the caption reads, the importance of compassion in the middle. So the explanation given is this, that in the beginning, compassion is the seed, like as important as a seed, like for Mahayana path and practice. And in the middle, also we need to make every effort to consistently keep, enhancing our great compassion. And the reason is that, as we engage in the actions to benefit sentient beings, we confront many challenges. Yeah, among the sentient beings, there are those who are really who have attitudes, kind of troublemakers. They just give you all the hard time. It looks like it's their job. So that is, not easy to deal with. So we need to sort of keep our great compassion strong and enhance it so that we will not succumb to all the craziness, right? We will still care about them. And also, there are many difficult things are expected on the way to enlightenment, Chakava means, such as, when the time and circumstances and all the conditions are right, we might even, need to sacrifice our life and body, right, for the sake of sentient beings. So cutting off the limbs of the body and sacrificing one's life is not an easy task. That requires tremendous courage, determination. So without enhancing great compassion, that is like, not possible at all. And also, it takes, generally speaking, a long time to reach the enlightened state. It's not like, okay, I'm going to cultivate great compassion for a couple of months, right? Or just for, let me experiment it for 2 years or something. Or, no, maybe I'll do kind of in this life. No, because we are talking in terms of many lifetimes to get to enlightened state. And in the Sutrayana language, it says 3 great countless eons, okay? So that is a tremendous amount of time. So if we have to be able to sustain our practice and spiritual development, then in the middle, we also really need to take care of our compassion and enhance it. As we keep our compassion strong and enhance it, then we are able to do all the things that are unimaginable, to us in the beginning. So that's why in the middle also, we need to make every effort to strengthen and enhance our great compassion.
죄비 청주 심바 남 당일라 쉿 미다와 현의 펜바 동딩 예비 셰 소서 현의 샤가이 샤가신 유정人了 두번지와나 요고 파바 데베도 제발레 송바다부데 들 인지 시험은 심지에 담지 요즈 메바 셰위 시 등에지 겨와 등에 겨와 메네바냐 지야미 티 대외 겨와 면도야 지야미도 시에다 신디 샤고와 쇼진 쇼나 링부모도 소조바 주로 세다디 디레 가지 이 고르 바라스나 디로와 디로 돈마다 인 심지 돈들에 에디 비게 너도 티가스 페바더비나 이 차와들 죽부는 거 더벌 요하세나 깔리간 되게 야 죽무도 버치로 죽무도 네도 죽니 지워리스 근데 파바 대베도 저 디스 뭐데 이제 세보는 심지도 요새 매버 셰 등에 되지보다 다 심지 로동도 되게 인시야 유전도 위다 심지에 가가 벨랑도 고로 저니 근데 등에 유드무도 근데 수직 문도스 근데 대외 유동금도 대외 유가가는 도도 랑도 고로 저거로 와 디렉션다 대외 유마도 등에 저서 다 예서다 등에 바시면 요하요 와 tinda dungi samni siwa bata tinda dungi tla samni eni shed shaga eni cheba shogni eni karsa shugwari ti shoginda ani tisi gide ningshe shebo top kazi cheba ta cheba la shuk shebo kazi labna en so zogro tinda jire siwa
So in the middle also, we have to consistently strengthen our great compassion and enhance it. Otherwise, we may not be able to sustain our spiritual development to find enlightenment for all sentient beings. If we lose great compassion, then we will fall into the paths of Sharvakas and Pratika Buddhas, who mostly care about their own liberation from samsara. So as Mahayanis, that is a pitfall, right? You don't want that to happen because your goal is to become enlightened for everybody else. And then we have a passage quoted from great Indian master Acharya Kamal Shila's Bhavana Krama, or Stages of Meditation, Part 1, right? So the explanation given on that is one of the reasons why bodhisattvas are so determined and dedicated for the well-being of sentient beings is because of their great compassion. Great compassion is such a motivating force, to sustain their actions. And so because of that, they are able to do the kind of things that we might find it very, very difficult to do, right? They're ready to sacrifice all kinds of things for the benefit of sentient beings out of compassion, great compassion. So great compassion also enables them to accumulate tremendous collections of merit, in the process. And then we have a quote from a text called, in English, Seal of Engaging in Developing the Power of Faith Sutra. Well, that's a long title. So anyway, the explanation given on that is, the process by which we cultivate great compassion involves really thinking about the state of being of sentient beings, right? And if we look at sentient beings, what they really want is peace, happiness, and all of that. And what they really don't want is any kind of suffering, pain, problem. But then when we look at the actions of sentient beings, they're just doing the opposites of what they wish for. So by engaging in the wrong actions, you cannot hope to have the right results, right, what they expect. And so because of that, wrongly engaging in the practice of abandonment and adoption, in Tibetan called langdor, what needs to be adopted, cultivated, lang, what needs to be abandoned, get rid of, thor, to get rid of. So when we wrongly engage in that practice, so the result we get is the unwanted suffering, and all these actions could lead us to bad migrations. So from that point of view, we can see the sentient beings are really in a very, difficult situation, and that should help us to cultivate compassion for them, right? If sentient beings want peace and happiness, but they're creating the wrong causes for peace and happiness. They don't want suffering and all of that, but they're not doing anything to uproot the suffering. So because of the wrong actions, sentient beings are in a very difficult situation, and that should help us to cultivate compassion for them.
so no me sawa tamji chebe ko to dio no sa yi che tamji zawa ni ning je she ko ning je kona she so ta dire she za ning je she bo shuk she bo yena ene yesi je ba lok she bo ke rong tong zan ma se ba sim je she kona du nge she ti du nge do be rong lu lu je kha tang tang ne to ja she bo sa de za ne sa ji ko mo to go she ro ra she da de sa ye to yi da she da ine 다다디 이게 셴보디 야고지 바디야 마금나 ine 당기 시야고 디 심제 제바다 디레 지네 람사 마홍도 그랬어 제도 야 주롱에도 짝주도 인지 송네 ine 마마당 그랬어
노소
데레 세다 셰테서다 바디 계셔 데 딘지 주데디 인세요
노소. So at the bottom of page 29, the way it stated that we really need to nurture great compassion as we are engaged in the spiritual journey, so to speak, right? We have to keep it going, strengthen it, and enhance it. If we do that, then under the positive influence of great compassion, that we are able to do the kind of things that we may find it hard to imagine for sentient beings. We don't mind sacrificing whatever we have, body, lu, resources, longzhe, and the roots of marriage, right? Everything we have, so we feel very delighted to dedicate for sentient beings because of the compassion, isn't it? But if we lose great compassion, or if it's diminished, then it will be really hard, because we find many detrimental situations, such as the one we mentioned before. There are people who can ready to challenge you, right? Challenge us, right? And also, if you think about, oh my gosh, how long it takes to become a Buddha, like, well, that seems like, out of the reach kind of thing. So we can easily feel disillusioned and disheartened, And if we lose compassion, then we will fall into the paths, leading to other kinds of spiritual goals. So for Bodhisattva, those are the risks that they need to take into account and watch out, and always keep their compassion strong and enhanced. So it's just like what keeps us not falling into lower states is the hook of the compassion, right? If the compassion is strong, it just kind of keeps us on the hook, like, okay, But if that hook becomes weak and breaks down, then we will be in different situations.
어다디 타와디게 다 타마 계셔와도 상이 남은 주비니비고 세영 팅미 신 시월미동 미네바 난게 제시도 더 돈세바 인기셴부 부터데 되면은 인도 돈 주시데 고르 바발이 인기셴부 용소 신비나 상이 정되는 라도 부동사다 예 신지 게컴 타두게 바디 효벌 제도 시에는 스데레다 간제 타마 계셔 변 상예자는 인제면은 이는 다다 상예 대화된 이랑 대화래 다도 대화야 대화 무슨 소리요 봐. 저도 이랑 시대 잠을 변데 비게 들려야 이는 그냥 봐샤니 이는 심지 그게 도매지 시대 그냥 봐샤디 그래. 이는 상예 대화데 텔 나블성로 그야면서 이는 텔 시대 텔 그냥 봐샤 쇼디 그러 왔어. 다디 쇼무지 그 그게 없어서는 인제디 그게 이는 그게 디자소도 레바타 찬스 파발 능구나 바도 इन दिशा के ने दे छो दुगु ना बा दा थामे में गंदो दे ला गेवे 시 소도 비시 가디 차디다 그 주다 저기는 통신에 심지 동 유미죠 야디 인시세 무성물에
And so how is great compassion important at the end, if you will? At the bottom of page 29 over page 30, so there is the explanation. And what Geshe has explained is this, that even after you become an enlightened being or a Buddha, the reason why you cannot stay idly, so to speak, but you always feel the need to care for sentient beings and do everything, is because great compassion doesn't let you sit idly. It just motivates and inspires you to do that. Yeah? And otherwise, think about that. Those who seek their personal nirvana or liberation from samsara, once you attain it, they, so to speak, get locked into the bliss of nirvana. But that's a tremendous bliss. So once they kind of locked into that solitary peace and the bliss of nirvana, then for eons and eons, they couldn't really do anything for sentient beings. But compared to that bliss and peace, the bliss and peace of the enlightened state is much more intense at a higher level, right? You can easily get sucked in. But the reason why you don't get sucked in and stuck in that tremendous bliss and the peace of enlightenment is because great compassion is a tremendous force. It tells you, like, no, you worked for this state for the sake of sentient beings, and now you cannot, simply enjoy your outcome. You just have to benefit sentient beings. So that's why great compassion motivates Buddhas to manifest in different ways, what suits to help sentient beings. For example, for Arya Bodhisattvas, they often appear in the form of Sambhogakaya, complete resource bodies, isn't it? And for the very fortunate ones, they appear in the form of Nirmanakaya, the supreme emanation. And for just fortunate beings like us, they might manifest in the form of ordinary teachers, right? And so that's how great compassion motivates Buddha to emanate in all different forms to be able to benefit others.
Titando gone here that Tadangema, you think he many young doya toyadi, English minute, English women, Tagili, you don't receive a minute young toya, minute Sayomora. There is that depend with even that. But no Loto, Thomas Savon, Thomas Savon, the party shoot them. And the Tama member, Geshe, that's all ye. Loto Laya, told the person, the Geshe, English, but then the way. Daughter be so the conscious yellow to put someone the better lose the Thomas you ever Geshe, but Geshe or Cheddar. When the Tondo of Gina, and Tomo Kesha, Savon Party, Chulu double jet, Tama Kesha, remember double jet, she do the best also to do. That the Ninja did the best also in a Tomo, the Ninja Jaggy, Tamboya, Simja, Ninja, Party Yam, you get a Ninja Yamashi convert down. That's not yet at the Italian long chair said the Simja Tonja, the Ninja couldn't see or but that Ninja would go, that someone to go that someone the Yazashi don't want to know you guys. Tomo Ninja was a painter Marilla, that can you call it. When the summer time, she must have shot and go to the no, this one.
So we're on page 30, and so Geshe explains that great compassion enables us to achieve complete enlightenment, which is also called non-abiding nirvana or enlightenment. The non-abiding in the sense it doesn't abide on the two extremes, isn't it? On the extreme of solitary peace, on the extreme of samsara. And other kinds of compassion may not have that much power, but the great compassion has. And so now we use an example to illustrate the importance of great compassion in the beginning, in the middle, at the end. It's just like for us to grow good crops, in the beginning we must have like very healthy and good seeds, right? But then seeds are not enough. You just plant the seeds, right, and don't care for them, don't water them, don't put fertilizers, then they're not going to germinate. Yeah? So we need to take care. So just like the water and the manure are important in the middle process for growing crops, great compassion is also very important to nurture our bodhicitta. At the end, when we have bumper crops harvesting time, we could enjoy it in the way that the great compassion, like even if we achieve enlightenment, right, great compassion is very crucial for us to be able to have sentient beings enjoy the harvest of enlightenment, And of course, in the examples, we use different examples. Seeds are important in the beginning for crops. Water and fertilizer are important in the middle. And ripening of the crops is very important at the end. But in terms of the meaning of compassion, it's the same thing. Great compassion is in the beginning is important because without which we can't have bodhicitta. In the middle, we need to nurture it. Why it's so important? Because without it, then the bodhicitta cannot develop further. At the end, it is very important because without it, then Buddhas won't be able to benefit the sentient beings as they promised to do in the beginning. So that's why we have a quote to substantiate that point from great Indian master Chandrakirti from his supplement to the middle way of Madhyamika Avatar in the middle of page 30, and it reads, "Compassion alone is regarded as the seed of a conqueror's excellent harvest, as water for its development, and as the maturation in the state of long enjoyment. Therefore, at the beginning, I praise compassion." So Chandrakirti said, I have a reason why I salute compassion rather than any other objects of refuge, because it is important in the beginning, middle, and at the end.
你这些么子上一些他们就像是说那就来的去吧拉说说的嘞对吧？对的，一些呢，那么住了上谁啊？都是刚刚计划的，那么住了上是那老板的一个叫什么？
So on page 30, we have quite a big passage quoted from Compendium of the Teaching Sutras, Dharma Sangiti Sutra. And where it's mentioned, it was as if Buddha is advising the bodhisattvas what they really need to focus on. Of all so many things they could cultivate, they said, you don't have to worry about too many other things. Just focus on one thing. If you had that one thing, then you would have many other things like in your hand. And that one thing is great compassion, right? Of course, I mean, bodhisattvas can simply cultivate compassion and not do anything else, right? The 6 perfections are important, right? But the point here is, if you focus on great compassion, you have it, then great compassion triggers the bodhicitta. And when you have bodhicitta, then you automatically find yourself engaged in the 6 perfections, isn't it? So everything else follows from great compassion. But if you worry about too many other things and you don't have a great compassion, then all other things are not going to work out. So that's why Buddha advises bodhisattvas, don't get distracted by so many things, so to speak. Don't worry about too many other things. Just focus on one thing. If you have one thing in the palm of your hand, it is as if you have the Buddha's qualities in the palm of your hand. And that one thing is Mahakaruna or great compassion, Yingzhi Chenpo.
Because last John did this, bad yin this that country. The college you said the Kodi Pen and Bung saw the Yamdo does it little mother. College you were Bung saw me, college you were to draw that the car is a lot. But it is what you would guess and the college you were there was go down to the same time. These two at the time. And Ganga, what is Ganga College Chini? College you would do like he shall receive.
So the example or the metaphor given here to illustrate compassion, that the point is, if you have one thing, that's the great compassion in the palm of your hand, you would have many other Buddha qualities as well. And how is that possible? Now the example or metaphor used here is when we think in terms of a universal king or the Chakravartin Raja. So the Chakravartin Rajas have these kind of very powerful symbols called the wheels. So, but with those power of the wheels, wherever they go, they're always followed by entourage and the security guards and all of them. Right? There's no such thing as Chakravartin Raja is kind of lost alone in the middle of the street. Right? It's just not possible. Chakravartin Raja always has whole entourage following him because of the power of his status and the symbols. So in the same way, if we have great compassion, then we would have many other associated qualities, along with it. It's just impossible to just have great compassion and then no other qualities. It's just not possible,
Oh, dear God, something. Per Gina, so on Bushen, on Shannon, the Sheba, George, the taking Egyptian Chanju Simba, Chushan and the Sheba, your hair song so sad. Did it? Because Simpson saw on women, the Kashi call ya in the Karsa Mega or Nayon was a son who are the Mazadable. So the Tiwashi would have the Simji teacher Shungin to say, she wanted to show. For he hid of the in common anything on Bushenda, because saw on women and middle and on Nayon Ganga Yomer, didn't I? English women in Geshe Jovashenda Ganga Simjida in Shindu Lovia, the Ganga Yomer Marilla.
No, sure. And another example given in the same passage quoted from Dharma Sangiti Sutra is if our life faculty or the force of the energy, Soge Wangbo, is very intact, then all other faculties might function well as well. If the life energy of the faculty is weak or it doesn't exist, then all other faculties are useless, right? Then we can talk about, what about my visionary faculty or the auditory faculty? No good. You have no life. What are you talking about? So that kind of thing. And so if we have great compassion, then many other qualities are possible. If we don't have great compassion, then it's as if without life faculty, there cannot be other faculties, so we may not be able to have other spiritual faculties as well. And as we said this before, if we have great compassion, then bodhicitta becomes possible. If bodhicitta becomes possible, then engaging in the bodhisattva actions become reality and very possible. if we don't have great compassion, then all the rest of those things we talked about is not possible.
어디 해서다 럼이니 담바 롱타에 바다 리버트가 됐다불 녀바니나 정식 있으면 싸워 인제 덕제베 쇼거 라 담베 쇼도 지시면지 그래서 뒤에 다시는 니가 다다 디시야게니 인지 셔보 계시야 유진 디시 인데 롱모보시 리버트로나라 이니 인지 셔보면은 사슴도 자요 말 가게요 말와 어디 리버트도 와와 디디 어때 루르 데네 이니 teaching lam ki rimba to telta sawa ni shebo ji inde je al kare gar dima tene ene me ki tanyo bu ba ko de go ya ti ke rimba to ya bo ji ene ne kin se ene di tiba shebo lam ni de ya ene karsa lam di ene be ki bu karsa ta kanji debe tong sho de ba lo de ba ta kanji tong do ya ne me ne me ju da be sho jing ge re so
So at the bottom of page 30, you see it explained that so it's important for us to realize how great compassion is such a crucial state of mind or quality to have, and that we must develop. And it important has been established by way of reasoning, right? Through reasoning, we can establish how without great compassion, then bodhicitta is not possible and the rest of the thing is not possible. And through scriptural authority, we have quoted so many sources to substantiate the same point. So thinking about the rationality, thinking about the scriptural authenticity and authority, we should be convinced that yes, I must really focus on great compassion and I must cultivate it and enhance it. And of course, now, once we're convinced with that, then we have to also think about the proper process by which we are going to cultivate great compassion. You just can't, do a hop stick jump, so to speak. He didn't use that expression, but you mean, yeah, okay, I want compassion. Let me jump over there. No, it is a gradual process. So we start off with cultivating sense of equanimity, and then the remaining things, right, to be able to cultivate great compassion in a proper order.
어디다 되는 현내중도 배슈 라당하시 지진 르통 르통 상주 있으면 고바 샤와시레 메용 샤바 라 이시도 베티니 주당아 게 티충아 송데 쉐기네 마제바 이노 예바 팀라 데레 다 거지 현나주도 바생지 다다간 쇼제베도 달 그 생일 넘냐 신경이 인사래 다 때문에 와카게 와래 근데 다 조절은 당황하는 시대 조절다 이니 차들로도 은 상주섬 이제 심어서 곰스 딘데지 막 송고에서 말아 근데 그다 그런 상도를 되면은 지다 나도 투셔 못 줘야도 뭐지 눈이로 대담아 도지면은 이해와 제가 메케다 대 쇼 당하시가 누구 있으니들 쇼 당하시다 가요 말이지 쇼 되는 세들로도 장주선 그 일쇼고 해야 되지 뭐 송야 가요 뭐 어디 라도 그래서 들라가도 제가 룸도 베다 세니 이니 쇼게 되네 세들로도 아니 장주선 공사에 남아 오늘 택바시 뭐 당아 티 송어래디 이니 샤나지 또 바코나 하모레스 그래서 퀄리티 티 되게 탑도 세니야 이니 룸도 베야 티브레스
So at the bottom of page 30, over to page 31, it's mentioned that once, I think he's what we might call a debating monk, right, by the name of Nachkun Temba. And he happened to see a great Atisha. Yeah? And so he asked Atisha, for some advice. How to go with spiritual practice. And Adisha said, you should give up this samsara and cultivate bodhicitta and cultivate great compassion, right? That's the set. So he was not happy with the response because his expectations were not met, because he was thinking that Adisha might tell him, you should get the empowerment initiation, and then you should do the mantra recitation, and then you should do the visualization, and none of those were said. So he was kind of disappointed, right? And then when others asked him, okay, what did Atisha tell you? Don't go to see Atisha. He'll tell you just to cultivate compassion, renounce the world, So that's all there is to it, And so that words came into the ears of the great Domtempa, right, the simplest person on the earth. And Domtempa was very disappointed to hear that. He said, what? Adish had give the heart-like advice to him. It's so unfortunate that this person, Nachung Tempa, did not understand the importance of it at all. So it was his loss, he said, Domtempa said. It's so sad to hear that. No.
我这下，现在俺可是啊，哎呦，先把人弄死，你把你往你可能该样子啥样子，哎，你多么个把拉上别拉说的，送了当工人呢，店里也把店不这个的是，跑半天没估计，我们当完了吧，却一通的人不去，这边享受啥问题，把有可能人不钱，那提醒我没接送不到罗斯，对，但上节课那个呢，特别是不让你那家的早的影响学不读呀的这个上节课那情况么的，大概是没得这个说这样写个嘛的是，他的搞不一没就真的不打的像那种东西的让你讲。
So on page 31, you can see stated that in some sense, why great compassion is so central to spiritual development, especially for attaining enlightenment. So the one who knows best about this, really, who is 100% convinced about that is Buddha, right? Other may not miss that message, just like the Shangnangju Demba, when he asked Atisha, and he thought, well, Atisha is kind of so simple, like great compassion, do this, he said, what is this? And so he completely missed the whole importance of the great compassion.
Here's about that you but that you told a person to catch you at the dash that you but you did me nam tea, you didn't do la machine, chamber par. And you're doing this. There, that is that any you remember the one guy in Gyeltsen and guy in Jibble do this. That didn't you done the candidate said, machine said, Wakarsa, you do la machine, chamber par. Do any you do it, she's doing it that John does when she in this seems yet doing it. Young Sambal came young. The Lord did love the shook about the temperature on the same young Shaba. You give up Pambi, number she got this, that is, you do that under the Malungo show that things in the Mashi the Wutina, that Kadu Dovshin, young Shamba Sigwata. So the young Shamba you take as a Jitan seems to be doing a tonsona. In the Aka Mare, that doing a terrace in some day or ever did it. In it, this on the painto, Marisa. It be young somebody country, be Hasan Shukshambo. In Yingxia only the death on it. Betting on the diet, Gavaji was Sheta, Ying Ziwina, and called the shows and Tito Sozo Pick T. Cordo and Yukta Jungua. That seems that the Asivena, Dungaji Bayina, Tito Jukta as Yomarva, take her language. Young Shabba said, "We will land off." But the young Shabba to go his team.
So in the middle of page 31, now we move to a second subpoint related to that is how the 6 other personal instructions are either causes or effects of compassion. Remember earlier we said, compassion if we put in the center, then the remaining what called the steps are either antecedents to the great compassion, which is a fancy way of saying the causes of great compassion, or the effects or the outcome of great compassion. So the first sub-point under that, it reads how the first 4 personal instructions, starting with recognition of all living beings as your mothers through the development of love as causes of compassion. So those are the triggers or the causes for developing great compassion. The explanation given related to this is, generally speaking, when we find people or sentient beings in difficult situations, right, suffering, So somehow suffering catches our attention, and we may be able to, feel some sense of compassion for them, right? Oh, how nice if they are, out of this compassion. But to be able to cultivate strong compassion, we really need to be able to see how all sentient beings are very dear to us. Have to see that personal relevance to us. And for that, we need to cultivate a kind of love we call Yuon Chamba. Now I have to use the whole sentence or more to capture this love. Yuon Chamba means the kind of love that enables us to be able to see everybody as being very appealing and dear to the heart, isn't it? Yeah. So if we succeed in cultivating that love, then because of the power of that love, we will have much stronger compassion, the kind of compassion that also motivates us to engage in actions. Yeah. Think about our usual sense of thing. We may have some sense of compassion for strangers in difficult situations where we will, oh yeah, I wish really he's not there. But think about the people who really care, right? So dear to our heart. Like it's just like, so when they are in troubles, we don't simply say, like, how nice if they are out of it. Like we just wrecking our brain. What can I do to do something, right? Why is that? Because of the heart-to-heart connection. Because they are so dear to you. They appeal to your heart, so to speak, right? Very near. So in the same way, if we can cultivate that perspective to see all sentient beings as very dear and close to our heart, then that kind of a love will help us to have a strong sense of great compassion that motivates us to engage in actions.
And Daniel Parmal doing shun, Pitcher, Yawan Doris, Daniel Josh, was that this work that you want some go using of the Dal donation the Gaja, Dal Yung Yomar, you Chatter. That year you as a qual donation with the that Parma so the Kai, that the year came and called doing Yunamina Pig, that none may so she. Chawara, what the young Shaba maybe limber, yellow.
So why do we need to cultivate that kind of a love or the perspective, love perspective, maybe that's how I should put it, to be able to see all sentient beings as very dear to our heart, is then we will be able to treat everybody equally and care for all of them on an equal basis, right? Otherwise, at the moment, the way our attitudes are with regard to sentient beings, they are very biased in a sense, isn't it? That in regards to the people we consider our friends and close to our heart, should any difficulties happen to them, then we really care a lot, and then we also want to do something we could, isn't it? That means we have that kind of love perspective with regard to them. But those we consider as enemies or I hate them kind of thing, well, then we have no love for them. So as a matter of fact, when they are in difficulties, we must celebrate it. They're like, yahoo, have some more suffering on them again. So that. Then if we see strangers who are neither our friends nor enemies, then we have a very indifferent attitude, right? Whatever, why should I care? It's a stranger. So this is why we are so biased in our attitudes and perception of these beings. And if we could cultivate the same kind of love perspective towards all sentient beings, just like we have for our friends, then that perceptions of enemies and strangers will shift, right, change, and we will be able to care in the same way for them.
That tell a Taman you do what you be in la day and chet the Jiva, tits of the doing Missaba, it is a shed, Jiva shown as the drink and Missaba Shung shed, doing it trouble like Missaba, the Chebo no source, or did that you won't Shambatella. Any shook shed you are, is it a shook shed you be Hutching any ye do one shit, drinks it shit. In the time, there's it's all years of shit, some you know, I think. Any shook because you're not till the park any tea doing say a lot of shook yours. But the shook yours, measured by any today you won't have a yaboji in a pentas of the permanent jail. Super Nazar, there's 2 minutes of you make mena until you are simpation in a donation or so the data of this Hiroshi and Fiji came again the Ajinga.
So at the bottom of page 31 over to page 32, it is explained that the Yung Chamba, or that kind of a, kind of a love that enables us to see all sentient beings as very dear and appealing to us. Now, it could vary in terms of intensity, right? We could have a very, very strong, right, that sense of love. Or we might have a very kind of a mediocre sense of love. Or we might have a very small version. Depending upon the intensity of that love, where we might have a similar sort of sense of compassion towards sentient beings. If the love is very strong, then our sense of compassion may also be very strong. I mean, think about, it could be your mom or a dad or whoever is dearest to your heart. If that person has even small difficulty, I mean, we worry like hell, isn't it? Well, that's not the expression in the Dharma text, but you get it, right? Why is that? Because the intensity of that caring love, right? On the other hand, when somebody we don't like or dislike or enemy has a tremendous suffering, that doesn't do, we might even celebrate it like, oh, cool, and maybe the enemy is dying, we might think like, ha, 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 now you're dying. So why is that? It's because of our attitudinal differences towards sentient beings.
Tadung tele chiwada, teda mare nyamba jawani yidu miwe lela, teda yang yidu miwe xie xezhungi, dungi zhunga la, gawa xie xezhung dinjoro, se odi da yung shamba la ya, ini tide nyen tide yuwa nashi, ini migawa jaya tela ya, da sozo dakwani sozo ya xita zikbato sa, tengu dini, yil shao dini koro saya soro tide dachi yungirwa. Da daga tez ma shumse to xita jikxe. In today's now mountains, you so you got that. Said the dragon is a nana guard, she already sit down. In that day, Master that is of Shuksha was coming. Said that dying level sort of delicious, she had autonomy was what you did down to the Shuksha Yora.
So at the beginning of, on the top of page 32, you can read that just like we can see difference in terms of intensity of the kind of love called Yung Chamba we talked about. In the same way, we might also think in terms of different perception that we have of others categorized as enemies. And there are those we have a really strong hostility and hatred, right? This is the enemy number one, on the top of the list. So when we see them, I mean, just even seeing them just makes us cringe and do something, want to kill right there. And then there's those who are enemies, not that level. Maybe it's the fourth category something. It kind of upsets us, and bad things happen to them, we are kind of happy, isn't it? But then there's the enemy, is kind of enemy, but we really, not that much hostility. Should anything happen to them, we have indifferent attitude, like, So that's why I said that the type of perceptions, the intensity we have, that might also determine the kind of reactions and the feelings we have towards different sentient beings. So with regard to the strangers or the neutral beings, the Tibetan word is not really strangers, neutrals, right, who are neither our friends nor enemies, we really have a very indifferent attitude, right? If anything good happened to them, right, it's okay, we don't care. If anything bad happens to them, we don't care either, right? So we are not happy when they are happy. We are not really sad when they are, in pain. It's just indifferent attitude towards them. Why? Because we are not seeing them in the same way we see those who are very dear to our heart, called friends,
Simjela puchi buta yidu duba zemba zebe shaman tisom yin dribu in this ti inje jeba sheto sita di unit doza de ti ta ti le ta ta jina 신진라 ene nye du gomba nye de gomgo yung shaba ja nye gomgo res ta nye na le ngaso nye na so tatu de mal nye sha ji yo mara ta bija le ma nye shi ra ta cheda ma she gomgo ya jiten de res ta ma she gom nye tatu de ma yin ta ene de gomgo ta ti ma ji ta ma shi be de ga le ene pi ka di do kha de chang do di thin de gom thin thin go wa di thin thin ba ta ngaso pe na so so ya thin mai kha de ja din chang do 마저가 있는 건 삼로도 매고 많이 가지 장도 지나 지다게 보고 현다 좀 하면서 통화요 와 어디 아메 건지 종주들도 가지 야셔뭐 부부 토달이야 아메 깔린도 가지 자이메 가지 삼로 망을 동터나 이 디지가 이 용공 상바디 야가 야라 어디 야 됐어 같다 그래서 다 디지도 다디 마시는 티체마도 티체마도 때네 용 상바지 그래서 어디 some dividend they show that maje tizo something suna any yong chamba chigris
we're on page 32 paragraph number 4 from the top where it stated that in order to cultivate that kind of a love called yong chamba, love that makes everybody very appealing to our heart, dear to our heart, we have to think about our connection with the sentient beings, right? So among our friends and relatives, okay, all the friends and relatives are close to our heart, but the ultimate example of really the friend or the relative is one's mother. You know, one's mother is generally speaking very closest to one's heart. And so that's why, it is suggested that we cultivate the recognition of all sentient beings as having been our mothers, right? The mother symbolizes the top-notch friend or the best friend or the relative, if you will, and so if we can of course it requires a lot of thinking, right, to be able to cultivate that recognition, right? And we can think in first with one's own mother, right? What are the things do I remember what my mom did for me, right? At the stage when I couldn't do anything for myself, what are all the things she did for me? And then there were things that I could remember what mom was doing for me, sacrificing, right? Think about that. And the more we think about mom's sacrifices for us, and then we can also observe how other moms are doing the sacrifices for their, their children, right? It's something we can see and witness. So thinking in that way, we really feel closeness to our mother and her kindness. When we feel the kindness, then we also feel the, the sense of responsibility to repay the kindness. Yeah? And so from these causes, recognizing mothers, all sentient beings as mothers, thinking of their kindnesses, and thinking of repaying their kindnesses, we are able to experience Yon Chamba, the kind of love, right? To see her as the dearest to the heart kind of a being.
Oh, the Jeva said was that Ninji did something Ninji Kaza, Yon Chamba, something Ninji Juris,
No.
that the water the Shamba, the Ninja, you didn't give them an answer. Consider the water says you are. Or did that Shamba the Ninja said, no. The Shamba Ninja in the something Shaman in the something using it, Rimbas Hitayo Marisu said. When you see it, you must show the art to do it, do it, do it, do it, the order to Yoro. Doctor, she was over. What is it? Then the Marsha saw you make was some. Big person, the other Tedu Shaba doing the Tedu Yiki hidden is Delas Bego Sosa. Tajita Shabadi, any chap Kasa, Tada somebody, any Injeda, the other do any Kasa Chambada, doing the Injaga, Jury or this show. Jury wrote Shabbat Shabbateva, you want Shama Mardan.
Hello.
Said that you got hidden Della Bego so if that. That del big was a city, but you Shabbat, because you Shabbat big series, right? You Shabbat did that mean Mahia did as it is all chain, Injeda, Chita Shabani, Unesca, give your money, carrying it in the Hagu, consequently, in the young Shabbat, in Inja, the Shabaninga, Judy.
So then on page 32, it's also stated that that kind of a Yon Chamba, I call it just for simplicity's sake, special love. Okay, otherwise I have to repeat the whole sentence like in the whole thing. So it just mess up the translation. Like, oh, see this love to be able to see all sentient beings. Like, that's just it's too difficult to repeat. So special love, let's say, Yon Chamba, is a cause for developing great compassion. Okay. But the generic love, right, we usually call about love and compassion, there is no definite cause and effect relationship between the two. Sometimes maybe the generic love, right, triggers great compassion. Sometimes the compassion triggers love, right? It can go either way. So it is a bidirectional, right, cause and effect relationship between the two. But this special love, Yon Chamba, right, it triggers both the generic love and compassion. So it must precede the development of compassion.
Judemati goes Simji gave you Simjan and Yin go, but then Lobon Dawata and the Suban Dawatang Lobo Kavala of Shade was at that direct Tanda any Jaw Toma Mabago, Jazz over any sort of Maltoma, in the Mashik of Sins around Mashi, Dick that you did Banga Gulu Mangadi, Lobon Dawata of a share, in the Center Committee, Lobo Center Committee. In the Lomo Kama like a Konozu song Shas, that the bond of the Manga of that. Manga did say don't go to Konzo in Bura.
No, so. And so this kind of the instruction that we are receiving, that how we need to cultivate all sentient beings as having been our mothers, then think about their kindnesses, think about repaying their kindnesses, then cultivate the special love, and then compare so forth. So this kind of instruction, has been accepted by great Indian masters such as Chandrakirti, Chandragoming, and Kamal Shila. Yeah, they all agree, right? I mean, this is the way to cultivate the special love.
Oh, dear, Karsa. She does that. How some da Simji driven you do it. The Lord Rimji Jangwe, Yingje Jawa Nas. Simji Yang, because Simji Gi, Tong Sanji, Tom gave it in the Chomu. Party, Hasam Juba Ji Yanas, Simji, the water table, the Yambi, Shama, the Yingji, Mevan, Yindi, the year Simji, that is what. Because you have to go up and do that in Yingji, yes, on anything else, Yingji Simji doing a Lamsa, any chance to the Jigara, the last Gumu to us, or this Hura, that is what you are. Or this what the Lada, this is what Karsa. Karsa, Menyamna, Simji, the water, doing it, Shabbat Yingji today, they were you do Yingji, you do la your race, that is what. That is Kajis last go marry, Yingji Javata, and Simji to Sajito Jiglara, but didn't do Maris. Today, Simji doing a miserable, but doing a tender to that in Yirala, your was. That Sajito to Shiva Nika. So he showed me a category, Tichava category, Simji Tajil, the word do but the Dunga could hear. And the teacher by the member maybe Karsa, Yingdom, Samba Harvey, Samba Jego, so I said, the day doing a tender of Javada, the one they do the Java, they pay to Maris. The other Deban Geshe, doing Geshe, and the last in the court labor go. So the English will court the land to Maris. So that the calling it last some silver, last some sugar, I just did it.
Then at the bottom of page 32, over to page 33, it's like a critic raises this question that, what is need there to cultivate the wholehearted resolve, I call spiritual willpower determination, after compassion? Because great compassion, should be enough to be able to generate bodhicitta. There's no need for the great resolve to come in between the two. So why is this required? So the response to that question is, even Shravakas or the hearers, So they have such love and compassion for sentient beings, but they are seeking only their personal freedom and nirvana, right? They don't really seek enlightenment, and they don't feel the responsibility, kind of a personal responsibility upon themselves to benefit all sentient beings, is because they are lacking the wholehearted resolve or the special willpower. Yeah? So it is important to have that special willpower, or laksam in Tibetan, after great compassion, so that we feel the sense of responsibility, right? We say, yes, I have the now responsibility to do everything I can, help sentient beings be free from suffering. So that sense of responsibility is required to be able to generate bodhicitta.
我这咱第八条的，咱老是那的，人家写不出嘛，老是国家举证白的嘞，可是老是叫做写不到小是吧？我听那嘞，结果现在被，拿就写被抗命这个嘞，不如果这个也不写。哎，你不的穷这个怎么是就的？你没长他们的人嘛啥呢？啥子？他的评价的，阿妈子刚刚我呢，他在农业县呢，给家爹的嘛是，那个。남는 사람들이 동양계 비게 뽑아 요 말이스. 다 진짜 컨셉이 아니 파들레다 아니 비게 메자 zon다 진짜 짠네 매봐 조고 사게这个现在돈은 야 손이 이 보디야 똥 버렸어. 그래서 항상 디제 그거리 인지 장지 편다고 뭐 디제 그거리서.
And so on page 33 we have a narrative cited from Sagadi Madhi Prachipramuta Sutra, or the sutra requested by somebody called Sagadi Madhi, Sagara Madhi. And the story or the narrative in that is that will help us to differentiate between compassion and the compassion, along with special willpower, wholehearted resolve. So the story has it that once upon a time, a great rich Indian family, right, has only one son, but the son seems to be a very wild child. He doesn't like to sit around. So he would go, and one day he fell into filthy kind of abyss. Yeah, and then everybody ran to that, got the news, and then the mom and the relatives and everybody, right, and they're like, oh my gosh, somebody saved my child. He's in the field, right, and then the dad, right away, without thinking, jumps into the field and pulls out his son. So here, the mom and the relatives and the dad all have the same compassion for the child, but the dad has a little more resolve, right? He feels the responsibility that this is my son, and he had the courage to go and jump and get the son out of the field. So that's the difference between having just compassion, great compassion, and the compassion along with resolve or the special willpower.
第八的他都写的，头大这不写呢？哎，那印度不是啊，这什么讲下的吧？每张从啥写的，考完啥吧，这些是吧？他这在东边头门头被本港东西的，第二上头下的吧？那个写的话是吧？他这样东边的上面是吧？写个的是吧？
So this seems like a very kind of ordinary, simple story, but if we kind of connect this to more deeper meanings, right, then it is this, that the only son, the dear son, right, the dearest son, child, who has fallen into the filth, symbolizes sentient beings, right? Sentient beings in the, right? The filth represents the samsara. So sentient beings are suffering in samsara. The boy is caught in the filth, suffering there. And then the relatives and the mother, there lamenting, right? Oh, somebody should save it, right? That might represent the love and compassion of Sharvakas, for sentient beings. And the father who jumps into the field and saves the child represents the bodhisattva's, compassion and resolve or the determination. Yeah? And so it has a deeper meanings as we look at that, why, they all have some kind of a shared love and compassion for the child, but only father was able to jump in because that special courage is needed, right? So only bodhisattvas have that kind of a courage. So we will stop there today, and we would like to welcome your questions and observations, and the mic is there, traveling. Yeah. Maybe you should start, I think. People
Okay,
are
yeah,
shy.
yeah.
On the last point, it was said that
Mhm.
earlier that if somebody has great compassion, then bodhicitta will naturally fall and everything else, which means that even wholehearted resolve.
That's what the critics think, right? Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
earlier it was said,
Uh-huh.
that bodhicitta,
Uh-huh.
great compassion is necessary for development of all the qualities, including
Right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So if the Shravakas also cultivate
Mhm.
compassion and have great compassion,
Mhm.
doesn't that mean that they will also naturally develop wholehearted resolve?
Okay.
There's something else that prevents them
From resolving. Right.
some kind of inferiority
Okay.
complex, like they're
Okay.
thinking,
Yeah.
what am I fooling?
Right.
I'm not a book
Sure.
material.
Right.
I didn't even go to college.
Right. There you go. I'll ask Geshe. Kurang kan shwe de dire gen ta zamzam liya nganzu din de da de gen da share sa ta share me ta mo. Pena namji dis go ro gen da chanju sem ki ande be ning ji chembo le ki gre sun cha ro wa. Ko khadur ro wa gen. And din de yin be yin na ane pena nyen de de ge de ko ning ji chembo yin na chanju sem ki gu go ro wa gen. Ta ke mo de de kare che be ko ju jo ya da sem je tham je dung le che na sam be ning ji de yo ro wa gen. Yin da 소소소리 야심지 shum되어 와게 얘는 예 제도고 말해야 오늘 상계도 유승하랑 알아 고대나 마더와 가리인에 다 지고로 와 제가 닝지 첨부 되어야 다 학생 깨트에 그 뉴버 맵도 가르쳐다 콘지 요로 와게 어디 가르쳐면서 다
this year 땡게 그지 단디기 라서 가르사 당기는 줘서 이용 샤바다 뒤에 강가 줘서 닝제 있는 강가 찍봐요 말스더와 소소 배 해자게 이용 샤바 숙쳐보 얘는 이 소소배 말을 때 세마도 능해를 때지를 미수 숙셔보지 하셔라. 된대가 숙셔중 인제 숙셔중 하라.
닝지 계단을 라려면 되게.
라 인제 계단 다 당고면이 페이지 바쪽에 있는 미니 텐텐다 텐소네 고조네 인 뒤서 간가 숙셔중을 누구로 와. 뒤서 차수 약고 요나 인제 숙셔보지 하셔라. 된대 사 마치 차수이나 능실 양의 용구로 와. 레디 단도다 कुछ जहाँ से बते गिरा इंग्लिश बोल रहे हैं पेजी इसे तो इंग्लिश में दिया लगा हमारे कितना कंचे सिमसे थाले में इसे यार याते यार सिमसे में इंग्लिश बीच मजा से वाला तो कुछ जहाँ ये दिशा से खुद के इंग्लिश से दुआ कजे दोदा तो चिक बात होगा कजे क्योंकि सिमसे 통도 다 ये दुनिया ये से को देवा ये ड्रॉप को सब खेले 통도 हुआ हमारा उसे 통도 ता इंग्लिश शुक्र बोल दो
As I said before, for example, great master Kunjin Jamyang Sheba, right, the author of the Gomang text would say that, great compassion is not an exclusive domain or the quality of Bodhisattvas and Mahayanis, even the Sharvakas have it, right? Whereas other masters like Panchen Sonam Thakur has said, no. Great compassion is exclusive to the Mahayana path, and they couldn't have it. So there's all the different opinion. But the reason why the Sharvakas, even though they have great compassion, I think it might have something to do with how you cultivated the compassion and the intensity of the compassion, right? And the kind of compassion, that really could generate the resolve, wholehearted resolve, is a very intense compassion. Yeah? And so that's the difference. The Sharvakas have genuine compassion for sentient beings, but it's not strong enough to say I have the responsibility to do that. So it has to do with intensity.
특별성 정보 셔도니 그런 세가 뭐 박자서 강도 뭐 봐시 이런 세야디 로 쪄는 정보 누구로 와. 다 뒤에 또 아무 놓고 배 로도 치아다 강가 정보는 링도 소소여라. 때 뒤샷 셔.
And sometimes it may be also related to different spiritual inclinations we talk about, right? Somehow have this inclination for Mahayana pattern practice. Some have more inclination over the many lifetimes, carried the imprints, right, for the Sharvaka or the Paticca Buddha. So all that might also play factor into this. Yeah. Yes.
The volumes are based on like capacity of students, like the low capacity, medium capacity, and high capacity of student. I was wondering if what judges the capacity of a student is their ability to understand the teachings or their capacity of compassion.
Okay. 고나 간지 쉐디 수도게 다 단다 데 닝지 단다 쳔보제 쳔베나네 다 학삼 게도 닝지 시고 와게 디디 간라 야다 딘데 셰데디 단다 가지 기부숨 기 지셔요 와 누버 치중으로 와게 기부 충고에는 누더 충고에 딩한데 디레 저 뉴도블에 라레네 딘데 셰디 거바 차고 그래서 야면에 상매다 게도 쓰기로 와게 고주데 나 닝지
닝지 쉐보지야라
다 단다 데라 닝지 쳔볼 학삼 덴도게 닝지 쳔보지야라 와게 지 기부숨 기다 소소저 뉴도블 와게 기부 충고이나 고 당번에 뉴버고 춘주저로 와 딘데라 양고 케바쇼르고라 가리나 스콜다
네 자다 딘데게 케바쇼고다 당부 로도 세중요로 와 로도 세중게 케바쇼고
당부 로도 장아야스요 여러분
다 장아야스 당고 시대도 다 시대게 와서서 시대단 배 시대 수도죠 다 디서 저로 와
라데
다 기부시부터 배 상지야로 안도 모두 다 에너지 거네 저서 심지도 등을 세야도 요 저버들이 하고는 에네 그게 로도 게네 나도 집에 지당 미배 계속해는 배 지고야 들어래 이 고문은 가요 말라고 디데도 와라
yes, in one sense, when we talk about the three scopes or the three types of practitioners, right, the small and the intermediate and advanced, maybe relating to their capacities, due to which some are able to cultivate, very strong compassion, others are not able to cultivate that. It's possible. But on the other hand, we also say that, those inclinations can also change and shift, isn't it, right? And it's not like, somebody... It's like, okay, you are the small one and you're forever going to be a small scope person. No, right? In the beginning, maybe, right? Somebody might think like, you know what? Even nirvana is too high for me. I just want a good rebirth, right? I'm going to be practical and go that way. But if this person can still, train the mind and be able to change the scope, right? That's possibility. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
Thing here, but about the intensity of the compassion.
Right.
Sorry about this.
Sure.
It was said that the bodhisattvas cultivate high level intensity, and that's why they're able to. All right, but the Shravakas, they meditate on the 4 divine abodes. So by meditating on compassion, they develop much higher levels of concentration than bodhisattvas do, because bodhisattvas don't need to develop those high level of concentration, right? They're satisfied with calm abiding. So they meditate on compassion, develop high level of concentration. Doesn't that mean that their compassion is even more intense?
Kurang tadi kan sure again. Tagi sonda chevena bena chanju samba zogi ta chansamem da kaza da tekjen begi da ningji jidu kal ningji shuk checheda roage tekjen da meba yogen da jigin na roage jidu kan ta chanju sembegi ningji di 닝도 시행을 학벌 내면 고든에 차고 여러서 저기. 대양 초전에 삼로 당면에 단다 년도에 되게 될래다 그 빨리 닝지 첨부 여배 온도 당나로 와게. 직전에 콘조 닝지 대 누가 첨부 요과도 스카인스나 콘조 닝지 디체네 아니게 단다 가서다 타발이야 콘조 배다 삼대다 가서 있는 시내에 쉽지 고무고로 와게. 제대로 샘디 시우지 참모다 다 템보다 너무 쉬우 수고로 와서 와. 근데 이번에는 디 괜찮은 닝지 대 쉽 첨부 쉽 차고 말을 해서.
되게 처음 말이. 그래서 그 다음에 그게 마다도 맛이 되네 되는 성로당이 심지어 자시 뭐 성로당요 말이야. 다 그런 것도 통도 있어요. 다 그래서 미스도는 동에 있는 거 아까 삼대상으로 와. 기대지 마도 이제
이거 알아다 닝지도 숙청부 이제는 심지어 탐자를 믿는 거.
어디 지금 말이야. 어디 건강한 거 누구 알아.
나네.
특별시보 더먼 디 검디선다 마시비가 에니까지 첼로 대아제 배 세직 뭐 이마에 마 심지직 마 처음에 봐시 닌데선 뭐도 에니까지도 슬레데다 에니 심지에는 비게 디게 동 마시 가면로지 흉셔 잠말에.
No, sure. I think it has something to do with how, as I said before, you cultivate great compassion and the power of familiarity or the habit with it. In the Mahayana, right, there's so much emphasis in the beginning to see the interconnectedness between sentient beings and yourself as mother-child relationship. And then we are not only saying that all sentient beings have been your mothers, but one particular sentient being has become your mother many times, right? So when you focus so much on things like that, by the power of that familiarity, your compassion, it picks up. But the Shravakas have a great compassion. They don't do that, right? They don't necessarily. So that's why it's the power of familiarity. Of course, their compassion is so very strong, as you said. They especially cultivate calm abiding and go that way, but it does not make it strong in the sense like the same way, you know. Yeah. Any other questions in the back?
This, oh, sorry.
So, yeah, go ahead.
In the part that you were talking about how feeling compassion towards our enemies, and sometimes we celebrate when our enemies are killed.
Right.
It reminded me of when Osama bin Laden was killed, and I remember feeling like celebratory about it. But even though I kind of knew that was not right to feel that way, how do you, like, first question is, what does that say about me? And second question is, how do you bridge that gap?
Sure.
Especially when we're talking about thinking of everyone as your mother, and it's like really hard to think of some people as your mother.
Sure. Yes. Kora kandi shwe di dire kin. Ta kar shugure pena ta tanda nga jesam cha sha we na rang nyen li ya ta cham ning je ye ba ta thala yin na me ba che ro ge. Ane di ta gis palma le na ta ye ba to sum bar ba ge. Che so ka ta di pe je yin sa pena tanda di ro ba ngi ma kar so re kin ta mingye tanda bin laden langa che ro ba ge. Ko kyen chingen di ta ko se de ka la kona sa semina ka bu chung sa ro ba ge. 딱 뭐네 전 노월 와사미 고세브리네 딱고 가고 용 버래 지도가 딱 코다버지 랑 마체르스 라브 삼로당 슈스 가고레스 로게 제가 가고 용 제베데 디기요 말 세미나로 와 이네 딱 코다버지 리베는 인지 게다기다 가서 탑람로 가려 고 마레스 라브 그 가고 싶을 차고도 와서 그러게 다디
되게 좋으셔야 말해 그래서 코다다 발레디 거 제바기 뭐데 챈디기 뭐 이거 저 가게 이제 갈 말와 제가 딜을 따가도 저와 토마베 여여 토메도 좋아서 이데메 봐. 에서 다니데 니저 다주세요. 뭐지 세지가 마 여러 와. 저와 해다도 아상상하러 와. 제가 벨라디게 단다 아르누에 챈들 지로 이거 다와시 지요 봐. 그래. 다 여기 가이 회 히부터 어디 더 토요나야 그 다와 이 편도 뭐냐 저와 가실은 니 다샤요 봐. 제가 다좀 곰니 단다 녀무서야도 따지고 공고로 따지고 하도 다 코아 그때 기부 정토모 람디게 코아 이데메베 양양 터메디어 양인들어서 해야지베 어디가 다 다닌지와 때데메바 강가시선데 되는 페이지 찍어서 저거라고 리바도 찍어라 그럼 다니 고모 자데 달로 살고 리드비시 달로 살고 달로 고모 자 다니 살고 있는 거니까 예리서도 해야 와라 어디서 저거라
Geshe said, yeah, that's true, challenge for us. But from Buddhist perspective, the framework we use is over many lifetimes, right? We just only look at Bin Laden because that's why we are not happy with him, and maybe we celebrated when he was caught and right thing is we only focus on this life, right? So in this life, yes, what he did was like tremendous atrocity and all of that. But when we said, you know, in the Buddhist logic, we said all sentient beings have been our friends, enemies, and strangers, right, over many lifetimes. So in this life, yes, Bin Laden, that's what we say. But in other lives, you know, I mean, he could have been our, you know, mothers. And so this is how we said, you know, as long as we have been in samsara, our relationships change. There's uncertainty, isn't it? The enemies become friends, friends become enemies, strangers become friends, strangers become enemies, right? Even in this lifetime, we can see how friends can become enemies, right? So when we think about those things, we said, you know what? Yeah, I cannot get too much attached to what I call friends and relatives now because there's a potentiality that they could change into enemies now or in other lifetimes they could become my worst enemies, right? And those who are giving me so much hard time now, yes, I don't like it, but in the past they could have been my best friends or maybe in the future they might become one, right? So that way, we equalize sentient beings on the same level, so to speak, and we cultivate a sense of equanimity, right? That they're all same in that. And the example Geshe uses is, say, and somebody that last year they somehow, you know, just gave you $100, right? And it surprised you, like you don't know why. But then this year, for some reason, out of the blue, randomly, they just give you a nice slap on the face, right? And then you meet another person out of a random slap on your face this year, right? And you just hate. And then the next year, somehow they come and give you $100, right? So it happened in different times, but these two individuals are exactly the same thing, right? One gave you the money first and slapped you later, and one slapped first and gave you the money later. I don't know, right? So it's that way when we cultivate tangyum, sense of equanimity, balanced mind, so we said all sentient beings have been friends, enemies, strangers, so there's nothing to really get too much attached to all these relationships. It shifts and changes, you know. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The affectionate love that we're trying to cultivate, the love that sees, makes others appear close, close and dear to our hearts. Now, isn't that a type of attachment, especially the word close, that implies some kind of identification and attachment?
Sure. 다단다 이용 장바지 송거와게 이용 장바스데 심장강 소설을 녀왔다고 그러더라고게 녀와 세근데 거기에 코란자 삼라나 코디오 갈야다 차고제 시초거와게 가서는 녀와 제제 저다디 차고 말로 차고차베나 니야 거기다 기념어지고 저와게
단다 빼자던데 라는 체시다디나 이용 장바대데 저자고다 녀보여 라샤
그래서
다 저자 인생은 이거지 말아 봐 아이 저자 더워야 지단은 다는 뇌자다 참바 있어 저 니도 노래하듯이 대서요. 빼요. 사서셔야 돼.
다 뇌자공원은 예부체제다 참배공원은 예부체제 다 가고 싶어 말이에요. Geshe said, yeah, that's a very good point. That you know how we feel close to someone out of love or out of attachment. You know, they seem more or less very similar. You know. So that's why oftentimes, you know, we are not able to differentiate between love and attachment. You know, somebody looks like love us so much, but it's really obsessively attached. Or somebody, you know, so it's very difficult in some sense, right? Because they function like very similar, you know, in a way we feel very close to them. But the love we talk about, this cannot be exactly like attachment, because attachment is affective emotion, right? But at the same time, this seems like a very fine line between the two, right? And that's where the challenge is. Yeah.
To differentiate between attachment and the generic love that you mentioned, the wishing love that we think of as love. So that's very straightforward. But this affectionate love, that's
exactly. 그냥 this 어떤 남주 치당에 가서 참바세지 샘제 담제 대화도 주나 사야 되대 고양 가서다 착과다 타대를 레로스로 창을 지고도 저와 당원에 닝 예부 시부치네 아니 참바스 여러 가게 나도 영어 참바스 다 딩원에 착과다 예부 시부스로 가게 감사합니다
디어데 다เป็น소소 마다 승mol을 지가 보셔야지 말베 두다 두자 되고 말아 다 현다 보면 현다도 보시는 다 고대네요 말아 다 소소 마다 이 승mol을 되될 비게 참 쓰보셔야죠 디나 비진 두자 되고 말아
So I think it's really, it requires a lot of thinking, definitely. It's just like, it's the kind of affectionate love we have for our brothers, sisters, and mothers, you know, and this does not involve romantic, excuse me, kind of attachment involved, but somebody who's unrelated to us, like, you know, our partner or something, right? Then the affection might also come in the form of attachment, right? I love you so much, right? So you're right, it's kind of very difficult, right, to differentiate. Yeah.
dobje동거든요. 대도야가도 닝 게차를 gen에서 시부도에 동의에서 동의된 이제 제거로
나래.
도야가도 이제샤시 다 미세서도 내자가 힘도 하고 거든 서문은 아까 전에 지금 흉체도 용도.
나래.
내자 되거라. 내가 되고.
그래서 an interesting example would be, you know, how the attachment can just sneak into our mind is, you know, if we see kind of a two street persons or a poor person, right, need help, and one looks kind of attractive person, we always get attracted to that, like, oh, really compassion, right? We don't realize, you know, it's attachment creeping in, and then one looks kind of ugly, right? Then we're like, oh yeah, seems to take a little more time to think and then have a compassion for this person. The other one is easy, like, oh, right. So it's very, you know, very sneaky. Right. Okay, we'll stop there.
I just want to ask you about is this a mental factor?
What?
A mental factor, this particular affectionate love, one of the virtuous mental factors. What is the term for it exactly?
Sure. 단다디 영어 참바죠 와게. 디 가르서고래 심중 레드 여러분 심중 이베나 가서 심중 다 개와 죽주 여러분게 디 공도래 가르레스 거게.
네, 다 참바 세디 장라.
영어 참바.
다 해당매베 개다리리 와.
알레.
네, 디고도 다 저에서 해당매베 개다셔야지로.
알디 공도와게.
네, 참바 세디 누구라다. 폰도 동조되어 와.
나래. Yeah, in the 11 mental states, in the one which is in the Tibetan, it's kind of long, it says, Shedamebek is a virtuous mind that is, what do you call it, Shedameba, absent of hatred, something like that. So it is part of that. Yeah, thank you. Oh, before I forget, I want to remind you once again, Tuesday is Buddha's descent from Tushita Buddha field to our world. And in the evening, we will have a chalk offering. You can bring fruits and things to be blessed and share among ourselves. So you're welcome. It's 7:30 here. Okay? Gange London, Demian, Dinda, Ninda, Namda, Raza, Chinyan, Dungo, Geshe, Seje, Nije, Tuga, Lebamze, Kanda, Zebe, Sera, Mendon, Dunga, Gizebe, Dozo, Gula, Boje, Daze, Yala, Joje, Doda, Jero, Nyamo, Nilo, Leje, Chado, Jose, Maria, Muse, Dunga, Nugo, Chinye, Jose, Radinam, Denian, Daje, Saju, Yes, tu go chu da chu da chu ni da lu me yang la de omara ba za na di 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 Omara ba za na di zhen de jue ye qian ra we ze ye da lu de mo ming ba ra se ne ga da dian zhe xiong lu do lo de zhen do zo lo de jia zhi yu zhong bie ga jin ge sang gong wei qu do min ba xin dian ba zin ha wang do ji zhou chang nian zhou wen zhou so wang de page 21. Obeisance to my Guru and protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You who dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma, arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wills the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri, Om Arabhajana Di. O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight in the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Page 31. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate being, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lobsang Tenzin Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Nhất tâm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí ngài đều phục hai chướng ngại, tựa nhật quan lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim ngài Bát Nhã Kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báo, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thủ thắng, cùng đại bi ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử, tiếng rồng vang ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp chướng, gườm trí tuệ ngài chặt đứt vô minh, tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn. Ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tướng hảo Như Lai, đê đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, cúi xin ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi, con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, ban pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh. pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đảng xanh nơi trí thủ thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ong mật thọ nương, hồng danh ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá, đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lốc Son Tenzin Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Sanje jindo mi de vi wa ye zhu wen xue bo zhu gang ri ra vi guo vi xin gang de pen dang de wa ma lu zhong we ne jian re zi wang din jin jiang zhu ye xia vi si de Then Jun Ye Dan Guru Rana Mandela Nianda Yo